Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a bizarre paradox from December 1944 that completely shatters how we understand the Second World War. We're going to look past the famous battles and the big-name generals, and instead, we're looking at the invisible, unglamorous machinery that actually decided the fate of the free world. And honestly, it all starts with something as brilliantly simple as a pair of dry wool socks. Picture this. It's a freezing night in December 1944, right in the middle of the Ardennes. Just 8 miles apart, two completely different realities are playing out. On one side, you have an American private in the 80th Infantry Division who steps out of the freezing snow and into a hot shower, coming out to get a fresh, dry uniform and warm wool socks. Meanwhile, literally just down the road, German SS Colonel Jochen Peiper, this is an elite panzer commander leading 4,800 men and 800 vehicles, is completely stranded. He is running entirely on empty, reduced to trying to siphon gasoline from an abandoned American Jeep. He's eventually going to be forced to abandon all his vehicles and just walk out through the snow. So, what actually separated these two men? Well, it wasn't courage, and it definitely wasn't training. It was a colossal, globe-spanning system. And the foundation of that system was one staggering number, 2,710. That is the exact number of Liberty ships the United States built from scratch just to haul cargo across the Atlantic Ocean. We're talking about a country that took farmers and welders and turned them into a workforce capable of launching up to 3 of these massive cargo ships every single day. Just unbelievable scale. Now, here's where it gets really fascinating. General Dwight D. Eisenhower listed his top 4 tools for victory: the bulldozer, the Jeep, the 2.5-ton truck, and the C-47 cargo plane. Notice anything missing? Not a single item on the Supreme Commander's list actually fired a bullet. They were a construction machine, a courier vehicle, a delivery truck, and a cargo plane. To actually make those tools work, the U.S. Army created this massive network called COM-Z, or the Communication Zone. Consider this. Every single American soldier required about 45 pounds of supplies per day, not per week, per day. To manage that kind of mind-boggling volume, the military invented what was an absolute tech marvel for the 1940s, a precursor to modern supply chain databases. They used these primitive IBM punch card machines to track nearly 1 million separate categories of supply sitting in European warehouses. I mean, they were cataloging everything from replacement machine gun barrels to dental fillings and, yes, individual pairs of socks. But, this incredible success almost caused a total collapse. By the summer of 1944, right after the Operation Cobra breakout, American armor was advancing so incredibly fast, sometimes covering 75 miles in a single day, that by September, the forward armies were 400 miles away from the Normandy beaches. They completely outran their own supply lines. The French railways were bombed completely flat, and Patton's Third Army alone was burning through 400,000 gallons of gasoline a day. They had an absolute crisis on their hands. The solution? Well, it was as improvised as it was brilliant. They called it the Red Ball Express. In this frantic 38-hour planning meeting, logisticians managed to stitch together 132 truck companies. For 82 straight days, they ran this relentless, around-the-clock operation, pushing over 400,000 tons of critical gear across these heavily cratered, ruined French roads. I mean, these drivers were literally stripping the speed governors off their engines so they could push 60 to 70 miles per hour. They drove 54-hour round trips without sleep, navigating in pitch blackness with just these tiny little blackout lamps. And here is a really crucial point. Who was actually behind the wheel? 75% of the 23,000 Red Ball Express drivers and loaders were African-American soldiers. Now, the U.S. Army at the time was segregated, operating under this totally prejudiced belief that black men were somehow not fit for combat, so they funneled them into quartermaster and transport units instead. But when that massive supply crisis hit, the white American Combat Army was literally rescued from logistical collapse by a segregated black support army. These men accepted systemic discrimination, yet they delivered perfectly under fire anyway, keeping the entire war effort alive. But look, even a system this unbelievable had its fatal blind spots. Despite moving actual mountains of gear, a massive failure in boot planning caused a disaster. Planners back home thought the war was going to end before winter, so proper cold weather boots got delayed. The result? 71,000 American trench foot casualties in the winter of 1944 to 1945. These were mostly frontline riflemen. That is the equivalent of several entire infantry divisions wiped out, without a single German bullet being fired, just because they were wearing the wrong boots in the wrong weather. They had to adapt instantly. General George S. Patton realized that the weather was actively destroying his army faster than the enemy was, so he famously issued a direct order. He mandated that dry socks simply must go forward daily with the rations. He literally tied the delivery of dry footwear directly to the soldiers' daily food. In that moment, the entire American supply chain suddenly focused all its might down to delivering a single item into a single soldier's hand. Let's shift our focus to the enemy now, in our next section, the mechanized myth, unmasking the Wehrmacht. For decades, we've all seen those carefully edited propaganda reels by Joseph Goebbels. They convinced the world that the German Blitzkrieg was this terrifyingly modern, fully mechanized machine. We see the tanks, we see the Stukas, but they left reality out of the frame. Just look at the numbers. A standard 1944 American infantry division had roughly 2,000 motor vehicles and exactly 0 horses. A German division? Only 600 vehicles and a staggering 4,656 horses. The Germans mobilized in 1939 with 500,000 horses, and by 1945, they still had over 1 million. They were, in reality, a completely anachronistic, horse-drawn army. Even their own top logisticians knew the brutal math behind this. German quartermaster Edward Wagner warned right before the invasion of Russia that they could not reliably supply their forces past 300 miles. Think about the absolute absurdity of this. Horses need 20 pounds of feed and 8 gallons of water every single day, whether they're working or just resting. So beyond that 300-mile limit, German supply trucks were burning all their own fuel just trying to haul horse feed and more fuel to the front. The math simply did not work out. Which brings us perfectly to our next section. 2 armies, 2 airlifts, the ultimate stress test. The ultimate stress test of these two vastly different systems, the American mechanized chain versus the German horse-drawn reality, happened up in the skies. When surrounded armies are totally cut off from the roads, they desperately need airlifts just to survive. Take the German airlift at Stalingrad in 1942. The German Sixth Army was completely surrounded. Hermann Goering promised Hitler that his Luftwaffe would drop 500 tons of supplies a day to keep the army fighting. But they failed catastrophically. They averaged just 117 tons a day. They couldn't even feed their horses, let alone their men. So the men were left to freeze and starve, ultimately surrendering. Now contrast that absolute disaster with the American airlift at Bastogne in 1944. The 101st Airborne was completely surrounded by the Germans. When the German commander demanded their surrender, the American General McAuliffe replied with one single famous word: nuts. And why could he be so confident? Because over just 5 days, American cargo planes surgically dropped over 1,200 tons of supplies, including fuel and ammunition, directly to the surrounded troops. And they did it with 95% accuracy. A surrounded American garrison received more tonnage by air in 5 days than the entire German army at Stalingrad got in 71 days. So when you zoom out and look at the whole shebang, the anatomy of this success, you see the mind-bending global steps required. Just to get one single pair of dry wool socks to the front line, it had to be knitted in a Massachusetts mill, shipped across the Atlantic on a Baltimore-built Liberty ship, dodging enemy submarines, trucked overnight via the Red Ball Express, bundled with K-rations at a regimental supply point, and finally handed to a private sitting in a freezing European foxhole. If any single link in that chain broke, that soldier lost his foot. But day after day, the chain held. And it went even further than just delivering gear. The American military actually deployed units like the 859th Fumigation and Bath Company. They pulled mobile shower trailers right up behind the front lines. I'm talking about processing 1,500 men a day through hot showers just 8 miles from the fighting, exchanging wet uniforms for dry ones. It was this invisible, totally unglamorous operation. It doesn't look like a weapon, but man, it literally kept men's feet attached to their bodies. The Germans had absolutely no equivalent because they didn't have the trucks to move a bathhouse, the fuel to heat the water, or the system to provide clean clothes. So the dry sock was just the artifact, right? The system itself was the real weapon. Based on everything we've just unpacked today, I want you to think about this. If a country's ability to deliver a hot shower and a pair of socks to a freezing soldier won the greatest conflict in human history, does a weapon actually have to fire a bullet? Or is a weapon simply the system, the logistics, and the thousands of unseen ordinary people that give an army the power to endure? Think about that next time you look at history. Thanks for exploring this with me in this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.